Welcome to the Parent Pit Stop. We are in week 4. It's so hard to believe that we've already done this for 4 whole weeks. I'm hoping if this finds everybody well. If you could, if you are here, please sign in the comments, say hi, sign in your name. Let us know that you're here. That's how we take attendance. And for those enrolled families, that's one of the ways we are getting some in kind. If you attend these as an enrolled family, that gets reported to your staff, and then they will have you sign an in kind for participating for us. And in kind is something that's extremely important in our program. So please sign in the comments, either by saying hi, signing your name, tagging a friend, whatever the case might be. So I hope this finds everybody well, and I hope that some of the topics that we have covered to this point have been helpful. Tonight we are going to pick up where we left off last week. Last week we talked about making that list of those qualities that you wanted to see in your children when they were 26 and adults and forging their way in the world. And we talked about that. Hi, Jessica. We talked about that. You know, being life skills that they're developing and based in social and emotional development. And so tonight we're going to pick up on the topic of self esteem. Self esteem is something that we don't often think about in the moments of parenting, but self esteem is something that is vitally important for our kids. And if any of you out there came from childhoods where you got some low self esteem, hopefully you'll see by the end of this session how important that is. Self esteem is something that children can gain through us and all of their surroundings, and positive people in their life that help them develop that self esteem. And self esteem is important because studies have shown that children who have high IQs and low self esteem sometimes are not as successful as children with average intelligence or IQs and high self esteem. And there's a definite reason for that. And we're going to go over some of those reasons right now. So, self esteem comes from positive interactions and um, positivity in the house, and that connection that family members have, and how we foster that. And if you are looking at parenting from a relationship based view rather than discipline, that's where you can do your magic in developing your child's self esteem. So, people with self esteem and kids with self esteem grow into adults who are able to stand up for their values, feel that they are important, attempt new challenges because they're not afraid of failure, believe that they have skills to tackle obstacles, persist until they reach their goals, know that they don't have to be perfect, accept and admit their mistakes and failures. They act responsibly, are accountable for their actions, and express a greater level of happiness than people with lower self esteem. Self esteem determines how willing a person is to try new challenges and to persist in the face when they face difficulty, how one reacts to failure and mistakes, how he deals with setbacks and disappointments, how content he is or she is as a person, how safe he feels with himself in the world, how competent he feels, how willing to take risks, survive losses, and to reach his potential and to thrive in life. So, we're living in a pretty crazy time right now, and this is a great opportunity to talk to our kids about what's going on in the world, so that they feel safe and that we can foster that self-esteem even in situations like this. So the opposite of that, people with low self-esteem, believe it or not, you've probably heard, these are kids that can sometimes go on to be bullies. But kids with low self-esteem will avoid a task or a challenge without even trying because they lack the confidence to do that, or they're afraid of failing. This often signals a fear of failure or a sense of helplessness. They quit soon after beginning a game or a task, giving up at the first sign of frustration. cheats or lies when he believes he's going to lose a game or do poorly, shows signs of regression, acting baby like or very silly. These types of behaviors invite teasing and name calling from other youngsters, thus adding insult to injury. And the list goes on and on. But the bottom line is, it's super important that we provide those self esteem um, building opportunities for children, because when our kids are 26 and we want them to have all those attributes that we talked about last week, they need to have high self-esteem to be successful or be more successful in the world, and to not be afraid to take on challenges, to not be afraid to try new things. So that's something that we're going to talk about tonight in regard to positive parenting, because that is something that if you can make one shift, that would be a great shift to make. A lot of times we get into the day-to-day parenting and just trying to hurt everybody where they need to go, and we might find ourselves oftentimes saying, stop, don't do that, quit it, don't look at your brother. You get the picture, and some days are just like that. But if we can shift from the no's and the don'ts and the stop it's to things that are more positive, that is a self-esteem building atmosphere, so to speak. So um, one of the things that I heard many, many years ago that I thought, boy, that's kind of woo, was that somebody said, um, for every negative thing that you say to your child, you should make sure you say 4 positive things for every negative thing. And I was thinking, boy, that is a lot to keep track of. So, but you get the gist of the situation, is that we should be saying more positive things during the course of the day than negative things. So, I want to say a word too about, we've mentioned the word habit a lot. A lot of times we just get in the habit of our day-to-day parenting and how we parent. And when we want to make a change, we have to keep in mind that it takes consistency, which is sometimes hard, which is why I never encourage people to take on too much at a time. Pick 1 or 2 things that you want to change and do it consistently. And then once those things stabilize, then you can take on other things. Because if you take on too much, chances are you're not going to be consistent and you're not going to be successful. So just pick a couple of things. This would be a great thing to choose. Shifting from that negative talk to the positive talk, so that you're now shifting over to foster that self-esteem building relationship with your child. And the interesting thing too is, a lot of times when we are caught up in negativity, that's again back to one of the things that we've talked about, looking at our own selves in regard to our own self-esteem. Because if our self-esteem is lacking, it's very hard to give to a child what we don't possess. So this is something that, while you're trying to develop in your child, you should always be working on for yourself, is increasing your self-esteem if you don't have a high self-esteem. And that was something in my parenting journey that I had to work on all the time, because of my uh, childhood and things that happened, and I had low self-esteem. The interesting thing about self-esteem is it can come off like you have a high self-esteem when you really have a low self-esteem. So that's something that you have to be, hi Rosie, that you have to be reflective of all the time. Always doing things to work on yourself, increase your self-esteem, take risks that you might not have taken before, build that confidence. Because your child also, again, sees what you're doing and takes that all in, and then will follow suit. So there's that. So habits, getting back to habits. So when you're forming a new habit, it takes about 21 days to form a new habit. So, it's really important that, again, you pick a couple of things that you want to work on. So let's say you're going to work on making the conversation more positive in your household. So what you need to do is, for 21 days, be consistent at that. Because it's going to take 21 days to replace the old habit and make that feel more routine. So don't give up, and always remember that it's not going to be perfect every day. You're not going to hit 100% every day. experts say if you're hitting somewhere between 60-65%, then that's good. So there's that. So one of the things that you can do, and this is a conscious discipline concept, and it's called noticing. Noticing is something that um, you would see in our classrooms a lot. And that's where the adult notices the positive behavior from a child that you want to reinforce. Earlier in a session, we said that negative attention is still attention. So if you're reinforcing that negative attention all the time, you're actually reinforcing it. If you're wanting that negative behavior to go away, but you're constantly giving it that reinforcement, it's not going anywhere because you're reinforcing it to stay essentially. So the shift here is to notice when a child is doing something that you want to see more of. So, for example, if let's say you have two siblings in a household, and one of the issues is they're constantly fighting, like they're at each other's throats all the time, kind of like I said before. He looked at me, he got too close to me, she knocked my tower down. That is where that starts. And then we start with our negativity. So the shift comes when you catch the opposite of that happening and you say out loud to a child, I noticed that you shared your blocks with your sister. That is so great. I just loved seeing that. That was so nice of you to do that. That might cause shock at first to your child, but the thing about it is you want to say that things like that more and more and more. Notice those behaviors, reinforce those behaviors by noticing out loud, because the behaviors that you want to see more of, if you don't reinforce it, then it's not going to solidify and become habit. So one of the interesting techniques that I read about today in preparing for tonight was to make this shift and to make it tangible in your mind. Take 10 pennies and put them in your right pocket. And every time you notice and you say something positive out loud, shift one of those pennies over to your left penny. So you want to start with 10, something manageable. By the end of the day, you want to have all of those pennies from one pocket to the other. And then, that's something that you can like, oh yeah, I got to move this penny. And it's something that's like I said, really tangible, and you can get involved in it. And then if you need to up the pennies after a few days, a little bit, the more positive things that you can say, the better. So noticing is a actual strategy, parenting strategy, to reinforce positive behaviors to replace the negative behaviors that you're trying to get rid of. So there's that. The other thing that's really important, when our children are learning new skills, oftentimes, like let's take for example tying shoes. Sometimes we can get really frustrated because that's a skill that takes a lot of practice. If you've had a child that's learned how to tie shoes, you know how long that can take, and how many tries it can take. But sometimes we forget to reinforce every step towards the goal. So we don't really give that, yay, you did it, till the child has done it, to the entirety. Every step towards the goal, even if it's like they made the one little bunny ear or whatever it is you called. Oh, that's great. You did it. Okay, great start. But a lot of times we forget to reinforce every step, because reinforcing every step is what, gives a child that sense of accomplishment and feeling like, okay, I can do the next step little by little. So reinforcing every step towards a goal is super important. So the other thing is to really change our language that we use with our kids in regard to, what we say. And I'll be posting tomorrow. Here I have 25 ways to encourage. And so it would be things like saying to your child, thank you for helping with fill in the blank. Um, it makes mornings, dinner, outings, whatever the case, is easier when you blank. Thank you. I really appreciate it when you. We did it together. Can you tell me about it? Always encouraging those conversations. Another way to build that connection and the relationship, which is all in that positive realm of things, is by making sure you watch how you ask questions. We've heard feedback from parents in the past when they've said, they never tell me what happened during the day. And when we talk a little bit more about it, one of the things that we find is it's how you ask the question. So if you get in the car and you say, "How was your day?" Good. You see what I'm saying? If you ask a yes or no one word question, that's what you're going to get back. So, we encourage parents to ask questions that require a little more. Like, what was your favorite the favorite thing that you did today? So that requires a little bit more language. And then you can pick up on what they're saying and ask more questions. But when you just ask those yes no questions, um, that's you're going to get those yes no one word kind of answers. So really thinking about the course of the day. What did you have for lunch? Who did you play with today? Did you take a nap and how did you sleep? Where it's requiring more conversation. So those conversations happen more and more, and that's how those connections continue to grow every minute. So I'm going to be posting that on the page tomorrow. So again, it's changing negative to positive and how we respond to things, making sure that when that negative behavior happens, you're not reinforcing it in a positive way. Another way to address negative behavior is to not reprimand, but to have a conversation about that behavior. And again, we need to make sure that everybody's in that prefrontal lobe so that those conversations can happen. You don't want to try to you don't want to get into a power struggle. So you want to kind of put in your mind, okay, there's a behavior that we need to talk about. And then later you could say, do you remember when you hit your sister? How do you think that made her feel? What were you feeling when you did that? So that there's conversation that starts to take place. Again, connections, again, relationship building. That's way more self esteem building for a child to be asked, how are you feeling when that happened? That's not a typical thing we ask because we're focused on you hit your sister and that's wrong. So those kind of conversations actually change the negative, the reprimand, the potential for yelling, the potential for lecturing into a conversation later. So there's that. We had mentioned previously something about family meetings, and I just really wanted to go back and clarify something about that. We talked about having family meetings once a week. So that I don't want anybody to think that we're talking about family meetings being everybody sits down and the lecturing begins from the parents. Family meetings are something that you could rename family fun night, so it's less scary for a child. And that would be something where it's a night where the family spends some time together. You can plan an activity together, watch a movie together, have a snack together. And then part of what happens is that the family talks about, what happened during the course of the week. What were the good parts of the week? Were there things that happened that upset you? And it opens up the dialogue for those, the brainstorming and the conflict resolution, and everybody using their words to talk about things that happened, because now you're in a calm time and you're talking about those things that might have upset you during the week, and everybody becomes part of the solution. So it's not something where we're talking about family meeting at 7 o'clock, everybody sit down, parents lecture about whatever. It's something that is a time that you set aside once a week for family connection and problem solving and fun. So that should all be part of it. One of the families that I worked with many, many years ago, they all took turns on what their job was for that night. So one week, this child picked a snack. One week, this child picked the activity. Everybody had a job, and they had a little agenda that people could add things to that they wanted to talk about, so that they would remember that night. And they wouldn't talk about it when it happened because everybody would not be, in a place to talk about it. But they made a little list as the week went along, so it's not threatening and it's not parents lecturing at kids. It's a family time to come together, and those types of things um, make your connections and your relationships stronger and are in a more positive tone than trying to sometimes handle those things in the heat of the moment. So we have family meetings, we have self-esteem building, we have changing the language, we have reinforcing positive behaviors. And a lot of time, if you focus on that, I just want to say, when I mention one negative thing, for positive things, um, really trying to focus on the positive behavior and reinforcing that can take care of that whole equation right there. Because if you're really focused on seeing all of those things that kids are doing, and reinforcing that, that will take care of itself. And like I said, if you use the little penny method, that's a great method to use too, because it's tangible, it keeps you focused on what you're trying to change, and that kind of thing. Um, so again, another form of avoiding negativity would be avoiding those power struggles that we've talked about in the past. So I'm going to introduce you to one of my best friends when my boys were young, and that is this very lovely portable timer. It costs less than $5 in most stores. You could probably get it at the Dollar Tree for $1. Um, so my boys are autistic, and one of the things that very early on after their diagnosis, when they became involved in special education, I was introduced to this timer. The way I was introduced to it was that the boys at that point had very short attention spans, and they were using a timer to increase the time that they had to attend to something, to increase that attending to task and the their attention. So one of the things that used to happen at home, family, Rosie says, I've done family get-togethers and talk things out with rules. Absolutely, there should be a structure to that so that everybody is fair, and so everything is fair, and there's some boundaries about that, but definitely. Hi, Elizabeth. So getting back to this timer, so here's a problem that I used to have when my boys were young. This timer, I ended up using this timer for like everything, and it worked like a charm, but it took away the power struggles. Because one of the things you might hear a teacher say at a family conference, um, they have problems with transitions. So transitions are in a classroom and at home, the period when we're ending one thing and moving on to something else. And some kids have a really hard time with transitions. But some kids have lots of kids have a hard time with transitions because of the way we set those transitions up. So when we're looking at classroom management, and we're seeing it take 20 minutes to get kids in line to go outside, and we have kids that can't get in line because they're becoming more and more impatient and more fidgety, that's not really about the kids. That's about us changing the transition time to make it much shorter so they aren't having to wait forever to get outside. If we say we're going outside, we're going outside. Okay. So one of the things I used to do, for example, is I would, in my head, we would need to go somewhere. And in my head, I would say, okay, I'm just going to get these dishes done and pick up a few things, and then we're going to go. And my boys would be playing on the floor, and I would say to them, when I checked off everything on my list that I wanted to get done to leave, I would say, okay, let's go. And the power struggle would start. They would be upset because I was making them leave their toys. They didn't want to go. There was rolling around on the floor. They were, they weren't verbal at that point. It would take us forever to get out of the house. But I finally realized, after I got introduced to this little ticker here, that I had plotted out in my head when I would be ready to go, but I gave them no warning whatsoever that we were going to be leaving. So I bought one of these timers, and I would say to them, okay, boys, in 10 minutes, we're going to leave. When the timer goes off, it's time to go. And the first time I did it, I just about fell on the floor because the timer went off, and they got up, put their coats on, and out the door we went. And I just was like, what? Like, so um Amanda said giving warnings before transitions, absolutely correct. Sometimes we forget they're little people and they need those warnings, and they're not on the same schedule, and the things that are important to us aren't important to them. Playing is important, and that is important for kids, but we have to give them warnings. So these timers can come in really handy. And it takes the power struggle out because, believe it or not, the kids take the focus off you being the one laying down the put down your toys, we've got to go, and the focus goes on the timer. So it alleviates the entire power struggle. So oftentimes these are used in classrooms when everybody wants to be on the computer, but not everybody can be on the computer. So this is something that you can set a timer for, to help kids share. And it's interesting if you watch that process, because if kids, if I used to have 3 4 year olds at my house on Fridays, and not even my kids, and I did that willingly, but anyway, they used to like come running in the room because for one of the typical behaviors of 4 year olds is what we would call tattletaling, and they used to come running in trying to beat each other to tell me their version of the story. And one of the times I said, they were saying, I had it first. He wants to play with it, but it's mine, blah, 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 blah. And I said to them, well, what do you think that you can do about that? Go talk about that and come back and tell me. And believe it or not, these 3 4 year olds came back and asked me to borrow the timer. So, kids have a lot of the answers in them, but sometimes we get so busy um, reprimanding and preaching at them that we don't give them the opportunity to come up with those solutions themselves. And when they're in that part of their brain, then they're able to do that on their own. And so I gladly gave them the timer and showed them where 5 minutes was, and there wasn't a problem after that. So this is a great transition tool if that's something that your child has issue with at home. And it also helps, especially when your kids are young, helps remind you that you can avoid any given power struggle with something as simple as a timer. So there's another little tool. So I've been talking on Facebook a lot this week about bucket filling, and I know I have some staff in here in the room, so they can throw some comments if they need. Bucket filling is something that many of our classrooms have done over time, and bucket filling is, here's our little symbol for um, bucket fillers. Bucket fillers are really about, again, a focus on the positive. And I'm going to post 2 stories from YouTube that you can read with your children or watch with your children about bucket filling, and I'm going to do that tonight. But bucket filling essentially is really getting kids involved in the whole process of um, being aware of others and giving good vibes versus not so good vibes. So it can be something as much as a hello, a smile. Um, and one of the things that you can do at home is do this. This could be an activity at a family fun family Friday or whatever. So I purchased at Walmart this little bucket, and I'm going to show you 2 different ways, but I'm sure our staff would be able to give you lots more ideas. So this little bucket um, was 97 cents at Walmart. So I've seen them, classrooms do individual buckets where everybody had a bucket, and each child could decorate their own bucket. That could be part of the activity. And then these buckets go into a place where everybody in the family can see. It's kind of a reminder that we're filling each other's buckets, making each other feel safe, making each other feel good, doing kind things for people. And then when that happens, again, this is where your noticing comes in, because you're going to have things like pom-poms or cotton balls or things like that that work. And every time somebody's bucket gets filled, they get a pom pom in their bucket. Or every time a child fills somebody's bucket, they get a pom pom in their bucket. And so, of course, the whole goal is to fill the bucket to the top. As classrooms or as a family, you can also go with this approach. So this is a just a plastic container, and this could be, a family kind of thing or a classroom kind of thing. And again, every time somebody fills somebody's bucket or their bucket is filled, they put a pom pom or a cotton ball. So one of the classrooms one time asked me um, if their classroom filled this bucket, if I could buy pizza for their classroom, and they had a goal to have a little pizza party that they invited their friends to once their classroom bucket got filled. So this is really important in regard to self-esteem building, because the other thing that bucket filling teaches you is when to close the lid when somebody's trying to dip in your bucket. So when somebody's saying unkind things or mean things or making you feel the opposite of warm and fuzzy, um, it teaches kids the concept of putting the lid on that and not allowing somebody else to dip into their bucket. So this is something that, like I said, could be a great family activity. And the idea is to, start so that kids get the concept. And that might be where you might want to do these smaller buckets for each one for each family member. And then you can graduate to this larger bucket where it becomes, a larger thing. And it can branch out from not only what you can do within your family, but as time goes on, then you can start talking about things like um, donating to the homeless shelter, or whatever the case might be, doing a community activity, a community helping activity, and that would be a bucket filler activity as well. So I'm going to provide on the Facebook page some handouts about it. I'm going to give you the name of the books in case you want to find those books. You can find them right on YouTube. One is Have You Filled a Bucket Today? And that's written by Carol McLeod. And the other book will be How Full Is Your Bucket by Tom Rath and Mary Reckmeyer. So those are the two books. And also there's a website, bucketfillers101.com. And there's all kinds of things on that website. And some of those things are printable that you can do right at home. So that's another option. I don't know if any of the staff here has done that in their classrooms and they want to add anything to that for anybody. Kindness as well. Let's see, is from Amanda. These children faces when they get a bucket filler is priceless. They make um, the connection and it builds self-esteem. So that's true. And it's really, bully buster kind of stuff, because, none of us want our kids to grow up to be bullies. Bullies typically have low self-esteem and feel bad about themselves and bad about everything else. And this is an activity that you can do early on forever, um, to avoid that situation as well. And it promotes our kids doing positive for other people, building their own self esteem, helping build other people's self esteem. And that's nothing but positive. So that's definitely something. And it also makes us really aware of adults, because, again, we're modeling everything for our kids. If we're involved in this activity with our own families, we're being more aware of filling our kids' buckets and the other adults in the house buckets. That's not always something that we're thinking about, because we get, like I said, we get caught up in that day-to-day stuff when it comes to parenting, just trying to get like everybody to get through the day efficiently, and we get into that mode and we forget about all of those positive things and those teachable moments with kids that are so important. And this is a great way to teach kids about kindness and that kind of thing. So I can remember a couple weeks ago, I know this has been done a lot, but I never really did it. And I've had it done for me where I've been through the drive-through and somebody in front of me paid for my coffee. And I don't know, one day I just said, I'm gonna pay for that person. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of paid attention to how long it took them to order because you don't want to get up and have them say that'll be $33. So but it's really awesome. So Joanne says it's a great transition to kindergarten as well. We often see have you filled your bucket. So Joanne, say a little bit more about that, about in regard to the transition to kindergarten. How would that work? And while you're typing, I'll just ask if anybody has any other questions about that. Again, it's all about self-esteem, positivity. One of the things that's super important right now, um, with this pandemic and the schools continually shutting down and reopening, and people are feeling really stressed and anxious, and it's really hard sometimes to remember to practice self-care. And that's super important for us as adults, because we have to teach our kids how to know how to practice self-care. Otherwise, they're going to grow up to be anxious adults. So, that's something positive that people can do, as well, is to take those moments to teach our kids self-care. So that would involve things apart from, although it could be part of that family fun night or whatever it is that, um, we talked about. If in addition you were practicing self-care together as a family. So we talked about things like yoga. We talked, things like hiking, things like getting out and getting some fresh air as a family together, taking yourself out of that stressful situation and having a release. That's super important, positive thing on so many levels. And it's teaching our kids how to take care of themselves when they need to, and talking about that. We need a change of pace. Let's put our coats on and go for a walk. Let's go walk the dogs together. And talking with your kids when you're taking that walk, why you're doing that because we need to take care of ourselves. We need to make sure that we take those deep breaths, that we remove ourselves from a situation when we're all in the house. And that's a breeding ground for negativity. When we've all been in that house together for 48 straight hours and everybody starts getting on everybody's nerves, somebody needs to be the leader in the group to say, get your coats on, we're going for a walk, or let's take a hike through the woods. I live right on Mohegan Park, and it's a great place to walk, and I really should do that more. But you know what I'm saying? Like whatever your family enjoys, even if it's a car ride, for 15 minutes or whatever the case might be, a trip to the dog park or whatever. Um, Self care is a positive thing for to teach our children, and it takes away from being in that negativity and getting caught up in that. So super important to know, to incorporate that into your day, or every couple of days, so that you're teaching that act of self-care. There are a ton of videos on YouTube, kids yoga, that are easy for parents to do too. And it's a great stress release. And it then you're having fun. You've taken yourself out of the negative situation, or where everybody's anxious and on edge, or whatever the case might be, or at each other's throats, to turn it into something positive. Sometimes it just takes that one adult to recognize what's happening and say, okay, change of pace, here we go. Or throw some music on and have a little dance party, or whatever the case might be. So that's another way to turn the negativity into positivity. So essentially, it's just really important to figure out ways to cut down on those negative things. You're going to have lapses. We all do. I know for a fact that once my mouth gets in motion, it's really hard for me to throw on the brakes. That is my biggest issue, and my kids will, I'm sure, attest to that. And if they're watching, keep your comments nice. Fill my bucket. So um, I got to a point, like I knew that early on about myself, and I've worked on it continuously. But there will come those times, that 40% of the time, when I'm not doing what I need to do, where I can hear my brain literally saying, you need to stop talking now. Please stop talking. Stop, just stop it now. And my mouth is still going, 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 going. So that's, that tongue and that sarcasm is something that I've perfected over time. And it's really hard. It's a hard habit to break, but you have to become aware of it, and you have to just know, there has was a time one time when I could feel I could feel it coming up in my neck. My neck was turning red, and I just, got up and took my keys and walked out the door and went for a little ride. My kids were much older, so I could do that. But because I knew that if I didn't remove myself from that, it was going to be nothing but negativity, and I needed to remove myself. Okay, let's see what Joanne said. Often we see that in classrooms as a model to thwart bullies, and your concept of bully busting is often used in the classroom in elementary school in conjunction with the classroom rule about being a great friend to others. Let's see. Um, Create examples that we can all wrap our brains around. The idea of being an empath is imperative success in school. Exactly. So, in case you missed it too, in conjunction with what Joanne just said, I posted some pictures. I think it was yesterday. Um, Katie, our head teacher in the Atlantis room, taught her kids about kindness with tubes of toothpaste. And she had the kids squirt out the toothpaste on paper plates, and they talked about that being hurtful words that we say to our friends and not being kind. And then she told the kids to put the toothpaste back into the tube, which of course they couldn't do. So then she explained to them that once you have put out all those hurtful words, and you're mean to your friends and that kind of thing, even if you say you're sorry, it's hard to take that back. It's hard to put that back in, and your friends still might be sad about that, still might make them sad. So that's a great little exercise that you can do at home with young kids. I thought it was amazing, and a great way for kids. One of the things when she sent me the picture, she said was that they still talk about that when that comes up about being kind, about how all those unkind words need to get thrown in the garbage can where they got thrown after they were done with their experiment. So really great exercise. Again, to highlight positivity and make, like Joanne said, get young kids to wrap their brains around that, because it's something tangible. It's an activity they could do. They could make that connection. So those kinds of activities are really great as well. So that's us for tonight. 42 minutes. So that's a lot in a little amount of time. And there'll be follow up again on Facebook. Some of the things that we went over, I'll be posting the books tonight so you can take a look and get a better idea of the whole bucket filling thing. Some of your kids may already be familiar with it if they've been with us, more than 1 year. Amanda said, remember what Thumper said. If you don't have nothing to say, don't say it at all. That's correct. Hashtag Bambi. Thumper was my favorite. So that's true. So, and what's really, like classrooms are like families with siblings. You run into some of the same issues there with siblings. Some of that stuff, I didn't make up. He looked at me, he touched me, tell him to stop. He's looking out my window in the car. Like those are all those things that, and that's hard when you're in the minute, because you just want to say, everybody look out their own window. Don't look at each other, but now we're all caught up in the negativity, and we need to figure out ways to turn that around, and to figure out other things to say to kind of distract the kids from that conflict, and go from there. And so those are just a few of the examples that I have for you tonight. Thank you, Elizabeth. So you know next week, however, now that I've said all of that, next week we're gonna talk about consequences, because I had said before in a session that the one thing that we sometimes fall into the rut of doing as parents is when we talk about consequences, it being negative. The thing that we have to teach our kids is there's a consequence for every behavior. For a positive behavior, there's this consequence. For a negative behavior, there's this consequence. That's how we start thinking. Thank you, Chris. That's how we start, getting our kids to start thinking about their actions and connecting it with the outcome or the consequence that they want. So it helps them become better decision makers because they can think that all through. The problem that we have with consequences, and this is what I'm going to leave you with tonight, is that sometimes the way we as parents set up consequences is why those things don't work. So we're going to talk about that more next week. So I hope you all have a great night. Look for the books on Facebook. They'll be up in a few minutes. And I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody. And if you haven't signed in, just sign into the comments so we can take attendance. Thank you.